So far, we have explored the nature of resistance as an internal adversary, mapped its strategies, examined its manifestations throughout time, and analyzed its neurological foundations. But the real treasure lies beyond, in the territory that resistance tries to prevent you from reaching. If this content has been helping you understand your own internal battles, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel right now. Why? Because understanding resistance is only half the journey. The real power lies in the practical strategies I'll share in the upcoming episodes. Studies show that 92% of people abandon their most important projects due to unrecognized resistance. By subscribing, you'll gain access to the tools that the top 8% of achievers use to overcome these internal blocks. Let's now explore this unknown land. What awaits us when we manage to cross the barrier of resistance? This is the final turn in understanding this adversary, realizing that the battle itself is part of a greater journey of expanding consciousness. Imagine being so deeply immersed in an activity that time seems to alter its rhythm. Your self-awareness diminishes, your movements become fluid, and you experience a peculiar sensation of effortless effort. This is the flow state described by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and it represents the first territory beyond resistance. Flow is the experiential opposite of resistance. While resistance is characterized by struggle, fragmentation, and self-criticism, flow brings integration, focus, and elevated performance. It's a state where action and awareness merge, where doubt disappears, and you become one with the activity. The paradox is fascinating. We first need to overcome resistance to access flow. It's as if resistance were the guardian at the entrance to this extraordinary experience. We have to push through the first 10 to 15 minutes of discomfort, exactly the period when resistance is strongest, for the doors of flow to open. Athletes call this the second wind. Writers talk about breaking through the barrier. Musicians describe it as getting in the zone. They're all talking about the same phenomenon, the moment when resistance yields and we are transported to this altered state of consciousness. People who consistently overcome resistance don't do it out of masochism, but because they know that on the other side lies this transcendent experience. Like the runner who pushes past the wall of exhaustion and finds a second breath, or the artist who breaks through creative block and accesses an inexhaustible source of inspiration. Flow isn't just pleasant, it's deeply nourishing for the human spirit. Research shows that people who experience flow regularly report much higher levels of life satisfaction, regardless of external circumstances. However, flow is only available to those willing to face and overcome the initial resistance. Our authentic life lies on the other side of resistance. This observation by Pressfield points to one of the greatest revelations awaiting beyond the barrier of resistance, the encounter with our most genuine self. Resistance not only prevents us from doing, but from being. It blocks the expression of our true nature, keeping us in diminished and familiar versions of ourselves. Therefore, when we consistently overcome resistance, we're not just accomplishing tasks, we're discovering who we really are. Think of artists who finally found their unique voice. They didn't find it by passively waiting for inspiration, but by working through resistance day after day. Picasso painted thousands of pictures before developing his unmistakable style. Hemingway wrote daily, regardless of whether he felt inspired. Bach composed religiously, often under exhausting deadlines. What they all discovered was that authenticity isn't a state that precedes the work. It's revealed through it. Like a sculptor who doesn't create the statue, but removes excess marble to reveal the form that was already there. We overcome resistance to reveal the self that always existed beneath layers of fear and limitation. This authenticity doesn't manifest only in artistic expression, the entrepreneur who finally creates the business they always dreamed of, the person who has the courage to transform a difficult relationship, the professional who stands up with their true ideas. All are finding aspects of their authentic nature that resistance kept hidden. There's something deeply liberating about finally expressing your true nature. A feeling of clicking, of being aligned with something greater and truer than your doubts and fears. This alignment isn't the end of the battle with resistance, but it fundamentally transforms the nature of that battle. When we repeatedly face and overcome resistance, something extraordinary begins to happen. We develop a peculiar form of confidence that transcends specific areas and becomes a fundamental orientation to life. I'm not talking about superficial confidence based on external successes or social validation. I'm talking about existential confidence, a deep certainty in your ability to face any challenge that arises. It's the confidence that comes not from never failing, but from knowing you can handle failure and keep moving forward. This confidence has a quiet and unshakable quality. It doesn't need to announce itself or seek validation. It's like the experienced craftsman who doesn't need to prove his skill. It's evident in every piece he creates, in every movement he makes. Existential confidence manifests as calm amid chaos, clarity amid confusion, and determination amid distractions. It's what the Stoics called ataraxia, an undisturbed tranquility of the soul. It's not absence of emotion, but an experience of stability, even when intense emotions are present. The beautiful paradox is that this confidence arises not from the absence of challenges, but precisely from having repeatedly faced resistance. Each time you advance despite fear, each time you complete something significant despite doubt, each time you persist despite discomfort, you strengthen this inner quality. It's like bamboo that, after years of developing invisible underground roots, suddenly grows meters in a few weeks and can bend completely without breaking. Your daily victories over resistance are building this same type of invisible strength that one day will manifest as unshakable confidence. Resistance works to keep us at lower levels of consciousness. This profound observation by Pressfield leads us to one of the greatest rewards beyond resistance, the expansion of consciousness. When we consistently overcome resistance, we aren't just accomplishing more. We're literally expanding our capacity to perceive, understand, and experience reality. It's as if each victory over resistance slightly enlarges the diameter of our consciousness. This expansion manifests in various ways. First, as increased clarity. The fogs of procrastination, doubt, and fear dissipate, allowing us to see with greater sharpness. Goals that previously seemed obscure become crystalline. Decisions that previously seemed overwhelming become straightforward. Second, we experience an expanded sense of possibility. What previously seemed impossible now appears challenging but feasible. The limits of what we consider achievable gradually expand. The question changes from, "Is this possible?" to "How can I make this possible?" Third, we develop a more refined perception. We begin to notice nuances and connections that previously went unnoticed. Patterns emerge. Insights arise spontaneously. It's as if our internal senses become sharper. Finally, we experience a higher perspective, like the climber who reaches a higher point on the mountain and suddenly sees the complete panorama. Overcoming resistance allows us to see our lives and circumstances from a superior vantage point. Problems that seemed enormous appear smaller. The path ahead becomes more visible. This expansion of consciousness isn't mystical or abstract. It's a concrete and tangible experience. You literally perceive more, understand more deeply, and experience reality in a richer and more nuanced way. This is why resistance fights so fiercely to prevent our growth. It fears not only what we would do, but who we would become, beings with greater capacity for consciousness, freedom, and purpose. One of the most significant achievements beyond resistance is the ability to create despite fear, not in its absence. There's a persistent myth that great achievers don't feel fear. The truth is exactly the opposite. They felt and feel fear regularly. The difference is that they learned to coexist with fear without being dominated by it. Astronaut Sally Ride was asked if she was afraid before her first space launch. Her response was revealing, "How could I not be?" The gauge on the panel in front of me indicates that I'm sitting on top of 2 million pieces, all acquired from the lowest bidder. What distinguished her wasn't the absence of fear, but her ability to act despite it. This ability to advance with fear, not waiting for it to diminish first, is one of the greatest freedoms we discover beyond resistance. It's the difference between being held hostage by your emotional states and being able to act independently of them. In the beginning, this requires conscious effort. You feel the fear and act anyway. But over time, something extraordinary happens. You develop a completely new relationship with fear. Instead of seeing it as a signal to stop, you recognize it as a natural companion of expansion and growth. Fear never completely disappears for those who continue expanding. It simply changes in nature. from an apparently impenetrable wall to a fog that you've learned to walk through. You stop identifying with the fear, recognizing it merely as a passing sensation, not as a truth about you or your capabilities. This transformation in the relationship with fear is perhaps the greatest freedom we find beyond resistance. It's not the freedom from the absence of fear, but the freedom to no longer be defined or limited by it. When we consistently overcome resistance and advance on the path of our authentic purpose, something profound occurs. We develop the capacity to contribute in a meaningful way to something greater than ourselves. In the great myths and heroic journeys, the ultimate purpose is never self-glorification, but the return with the gift that benefits the community. The hero who defeats the dragon and returns with the elixir doesn't keep it for himself. He shares it with his people. Similarly, our personal battles against resistance aren't just for our own benefit. They prepare us to offer our unique contribution to the world, whether through art that inspires, businesses that improve lives, research that expands human knowledge, or simply through authentic presence that enriches our family and community. This perspective of service fundamentally transforms our relationship with resistance. When we work only for ourselves, resistance can always use our ego against us, our insecurities, our fear of judgment, our need for approval. But when we work in service of something greater, a cause, a community, a calling, we find a source of motivation that transcends these insecurities. As the old proverb says, it's amazing how much you can accomplish when you don't care who gets the credit. This orientation toward service doesn't diminish our individuality. Paradoxically, it strengthens and expands it. As Viktor Frankl and others have demonstrated, we find our deepest meaning not by looking inward, but by looking beyond ourselves to the contributions we can make. Beyond resistance, we discover that our struggles weren't just about our personal achievement, but about becoming capable of offering something valuable to the world. The skills we developed, the resilience we built, the wisdom we acquired, everything becomes part of our unique gift. We now arrive at the final turn in our understanding of resistance, a paradoxical truth that changes everything. Resistance, which seemed our mortal enemy, is actually a necessary portal for our evolution. Without the opposition that resistance provides, we wouldn't develop the strength, resilience, and wisdom necessary for higher levels of consciousness and contribution. Like the wind that forces the tree to develop deeper roots, resistance challenges us to grow in ways that would be impossible without it. This understanding represents a fundamental shift in perspective. Resistance ceases to be just an obstacle to be overcome and becomes an essential teacher in the human journey. The periods of greatest difficulty, when resistance seemed most oppressive, are often the moments of most significant growth. Think about the moments when you overcame strong resistance in your life. They weren't just external achievements, they were profound internal transformations. You became a different person by crossing through the portal of resistance. This perspective doesn't romanticize unnecessary suffering, nor suggest that we should seek difficulties for their own sake. Instead, it recognizes that the challenges inherent to growth, the resistance that naturally arises when we seek to elevate ourselves, are an integral part of the evolutionary process. It's like the process of a butterfly's metamorphosis. The chrysalis's struggle to exit the cocoon isn't an obstacle to its transformation. It's essential for strengthening its wings. If we tried to help by cutting the cocoon, the butterfly would never develop the strength necessary to fly. Similarly, our struggle against resistance isn't separate from our transformation. It's the very mechanism through which this transformation occurs. Each time we face and overcome resistance, we're literally building new neurological, psychological, and spiritual muscles. We began our journey by identifying resistance as an invisible enemy that works against our growth. We explored its strategy, its universal presence throughout time, its neurological foundations, and finally, the territory beyond it. Now, we complete the circle with a transformed understanding. Resistance isn't merely an obstacle, but a necessary component of our evolution. This understanding doesn't make resistance less challenging, but it fundamentally transforms our relationship with it. Instead of seeing it as an enemy to be eliminated, we come to recognize it as an indicator and catalyst for growth. Your greatest fear isn't failure, but growing and becoming who you really are. Resistance knows this. That's why it fights so fiercely to keep you where you are. Like the navigator facing the unknown, you must advance despite fear. The next time you feel resistance arising, that hesitation, that procrastination, that doubt, recognize it for what it really is. Not just an obstacle, but a precise indicator of the path forward. And then, take a small step forward. The inner battle never completely ends. However, its nature changes profoundly. What was once a struggle against an invisible enemy becomes a dance with a recognized teacher. Resistance continues to appear, but you recognize it as a signpost of growth, not as a barrier to it. With each victory, you become more capable of recognizing resistance, transcending it, and discovering what exists beyond it. Your full capacity, your authentic voice, your greatest contribution. And perhaps the deepest discovery is this. The purpose of the journey was never to eliminate resistance, but to transform yourself through the process of facing it. As Rainer Maria Rilke wrote, and if from within, from the deepest source, your life emerging outward. For what is it, finally, but being ready for birth? Resistance marks precisely the point where something new is about to be born through you. Recognize it not as your enemy, but as the herald of your next evolution. What will you do now with this knowledge? If this journey through resistance has awakened something in you, share your reflections in the comments. Which aspect of the other side of resistance most resonated with your experience? And if this content touched something deep, consider sharing it with someone who might be struggling at this very moment with their own inner battle. Sometimes, a new perspective is all we need to transform our relationship with challenges.